Good morning. Welcome to the October 7th meeting of the Michigan State Transportation Commission. We're in Lyon Township, which is my favorite township. I've actually never been able to say that in the 9 years I've been here, but I've been in Lyon Township since I was in my 20s. And so without ado, I'll have John Dolan, the supervisor, come up and say a few words. And thank you, John, for hosting us.
Thank you, Chairman Wyatt, and I would like to welcome the commissioners to Lyon Township. I have been lucky enough to be elected the supervisor of Lyon Township a few years back, and it's a wonderful, wonderful township. As you probably know, it's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, growing townships in the state of Michigan. So it's kind of a tough township to supervise. There's a lot going on. But that being said, the community of Lyon Township is very honored by this Board of Commissioners having their October meeting here in the township. And I just want to let you know that it is very honorable, and we appreciate that. That being said, we are here to help you in any way. Our staff will help you. I will help you. So that being said, welcome again, and thanks for having it here. Chairman Wyatt, please.
Thanks, John. It's odd to sit in the seat with you out there and me over here. Although I have sat in the seat before, I used to chair their Downtown Development Authority. So thank you again. And the director has his report.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Before I start my report, if you will allow me a few minutes to say a few words and acknowledge some of our MDOT staff in the room. It's been a long and very interesting year for us at MDOT because, as you know, we are the focus of the administration's main campaign issues, fixing the roads, and transitioning from a director that was there for 13 years to us coming in and just drinking from a fire hose has been very challenging. But I think having leadership that came up through the ranks in the department, and we all know and trusted each other, has really made it a little easier for us to be able to weather the storm. So I'd like to take a minute to just acknowledge all the MDOT employees in the room and all the wonderful job they've done throughout the whole year. If you all could please stand up. Thank you. Today I'd like to share my report. It's more of an update on some of the events that's happened in the last few months. Which one do I push? No, which one do I push? Just push that. Okay. So as you were, the governor proposed a budget of raising the gas tax 45 cents, generating about $2.5 billion revenue, mostly going towards transportation. But then the legislatures came back with a different approach. Part of the legislature's proposal was to give them $400 million towards transportation, of which of the $400 million, MDOT only got $106 million. And they also included fixing 4 bridges out of 1,000 bad bridges in the state. So the governor, through the ad board, returned that 375 of that $400 million back to the legislatures because, again, it's just the same old way of us trying to fund our transportation road system. And the idea of the one-time general fund money going towards transportation has been proven not to work. We started this idea in 2013, and I can tell you that in 2013 when we started that, payment condition was at 85%. And every year since then, we've been getting infusion of one-time fund from the legislature and our pavement condition kept going down. We're now at 78%. You'll see in one of my slides. So the governor's approach is, this is not working, let's do something different. So my presentation here today is just first the overview. The line item videos totaling about $375 million, as I mentioned, was the governor line item, those $375 million. And state ad board totaling about $8.2 million were made by the governor. Highlights of that is accelerated income tax redirection from 2015 revenue package. As you know, in 2015, the Governor Snyder's administration passed a transportation funding bill, which I will talk about in my next few slides about how the effect of that funding bill, where we are today. Budget increase requests related to maintenance were approved, about almost $67 million. IT was increased $3 million. Ad board actions, many shortfalls in passenger transportation, removal of unnecessary reporting related to real estate-owned payment information, staff monitoring, and freedom of information request. This puts some pressure on our system, and the pressure, again, reduction in rail operation, $10 million, design, engineering services, I can't see, but anyway, balance needed to address the city of shortfall is about $27 million. Conditions decline result of 40 years of disinvestment. Again, you'll see in my next slide how this disinvestment is really going to be a big problem if we don't address this moving forward very soon. Again, we're at 78% fair good condition right now. If nothing is done between now moving forward, we are going to drop to 65% in the next 2 years. And as you know, the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets to catch up. MDOT forecast was $1.5 billion in additional revenue needed to get to the 90% goal that the governor has set. But again, in 2015, legislatures passed a bill for $1.2 billion, and then they ran it through the Act 51 formula. We only got 39.1% of that. If you do the calculation, I think that's about $470 million of that, which is not enough to address the issue. And quite frankly, the half of that we're not going to receive till 2021. So while our condition is declining, we're still waiting for that money to kick in. As I mentioned, this slide here just shows you where we are. That orange line is where our condition was headed prior to that 2015 legislation. That black line, assuming that 2021, half of that $600 million kicks in 2021, still shows a major decline. All it did is slow it down. It doesn't stop the slide. As I mentioned, if we don't do anything with that black line, take a look at 2021, we'll be down to 65% payment condition. So it's really on a downward trajectory fast. The green line is what the governor's proposing. And when I said it's been an interesting year, is that if you look at the governor's three main focus of our good government budget, it's good roads, good schools, clean drinking water. And I mean, who could be against those things? But again, that's where we are. If we don't do anything, the condition it's not looking good at all. So this slide is just kind of showing what revenue will be needed to achieve the trunkline condition goal of getting to that 90%. And you'll see in the next slide what that entails. The red line is the current condition, as I mentioned. What we did here just kind of showed the different scenarios of if the legislatures decided, okay, we can't give you $1.5 billion, MDOT, we only give you $1 billion. As you can see, that middle line, the gray line, shows that our condition is still going to be declining. We're not going to get to that 90% goal. The blue line is the governor's proposal. So if we get anything less than the $1.5 billion, we're still just going to be doing a lot of firefighting out there, trying to hold the system together and not see a major improvement in our pavement condition. So this here is just kind of showing what our 5-year plan looks like, what we're projecting based on our existing revenue stream. Between 2020 and 2024, the 5-year total investment is about $12.3 billion. That pie, the way it's distributed, $9.3 billion of that goes to highway program. Public transportation program is about $2.3 billion. And then the last piece of that pie is the aviation, which is $700 million. Fiscal year 2020 highway program is $1.7 billion. Repair and rebuild roads is about $549 million. Trunk line, it's about $195 million. Bridge program is $190 million. Maintenance, it's $416 million. Safety and system operations eats up about $230 million of that pie, and the rest is about $122 million. So what I'd like to do is just kind of highlight some of the projects that are going to be eaten up by this money in 2020. First one here is a project in Detroit, I-94 Second Avenue Bridge. It's about a $24 million project. It's a tied-out bridge. As you can see there in that picture, it's really going to be a very good iconic bridge once it's done. It's going to highlight in more of like the gateway into the city. The bridge will include 2 driving lanes with bike lanes, sidewalks, lighting, and planter boxes. It's going to be right by Wayne State area there, and target construction, as I mentioned, is next year. This is I-496 in Lansing. If you've been in Lansing lately, just west of MLK going towards 96, the pavement there is really bad. It's been bad for a while. As a matter of fact, on one of my town hall presentation, west side of the state, one of the legislators accused MDOT of intentionally letting that road go by to send a message, and I told him we're not that calculated in MDOT. We do repairs based on the money we have and data. So this is a long overdue project. It's a $60 million project, 7.2 miles. Full depth, we're going to tear out the entire pavement and reconstruct it. And again, it's with 13 bridges along that corridor slated for construction next year. There's US 131 on the 100th Street. The cost of the project is $10 million. It's bridge replacement. We're doing the entire interchange there with non-motorized facility and sidewalks. So again, this is a project that we're hoping we're going to start next year in 2020 summer. I-94 US 31 in the Kalamazoo area. This is 3.5 miles from Brighton Avenue to I-196. It's eastbound auxiliary lane from US 31 to I-196. It's about 1.8 miles of new freeway repair from Napier Avenue to I-94. We're reconstructing and reconfiguring 2 miles of the business loop. Reconfigure Crystal Avenue intersection. Again, this is a project, as I mentioned, slated for next year as well. I-75 reconstruction at M46, $60 million, 2.5 miles of total reconstruct. And also done some pump station projects that it's about a 18-foot freeway deep just north of M46. It's going to be one of next year projects as well. M28 in Munising, $15 million project, 2.5 miles of concrete pavement rehab. It's a 2-year project, and again, next year. US 31 reconstruction and safety project, $6 million, 2.5 mile widening, next year. So, state of good repair and grant funding, $23.4 million grant funding match. This is something that will include a rail, cross tie, and track resurfacing. This is through the hard work of our folks in the rail section that went very aggressively after this grant, and we are happy to be selected for the grant. So that. Aeronautics, we've got Bishop International Airport in Flint. We're going to be spending about $9 million there. We total of about $29 million on the Ford International Airport. And then the Bishop International Airport project is to reconstruct a runway and shoulders. Design, I can't see, but anyway, that's pretty much what we are going to be doing with aeronautics next year. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for the Director?
I just make a comment, Mr. Chairman. In Midland, the Robertson Bridge opened yesterday, and I know that's not in here, and I know that's ancient history. Once we get them kind of started and done, we kind of forget about it and move on to all this stuff, which is logical. But kudos to the folks in the region up there of MDOT for doing such an exceptional job in a very, very difficult situation where you've got a major trunk line feeder into and out of town with two bridges, basically two bridges, two lanes in each direction, and bringing it down over the last 2 years into one lane in each direction on each side. And it was kind of a brilliant move on how to do it, but it's been a long haul, and patience of a lot of drivers have worn thin. But I think MDOT and the contractors have done an exceptional job, so just wanted to give recognition to that.
Thank you, sir. I'll be glad to pass that along to our folks over there.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the I-75 reconstruction at M46, it says in there the project will fill in an 18-foot freeway dip just north of M46, eliminating the need for an I-75 pump station. Do we find that that saves us money in the long run to do something like that?
Morning, Commissioner Tony Cratifield, the Chief Operating Officer. So this is the area just north of M46 where there used to be a railroad crossing. So the freeway was depressed underneath there. There is an existing pump station. And we're going to basically be bringing that back up to grade because the railroad is not there anymore. So it does save money in the sense that we don't have to build a new pump station, and we don't have to pay to operate and maintain that pump station. It also will make it a little safer. If you recall driving through there, it kind of narrows up and you have to there's hardly a shoulder in the median. This will allow for kind of the standard freeway shoulders and make for a safer crossing in the area.
Thank you.
George?
First, you know what an advocate I am for transportation asset management planning, so I find it strange that I'm even asking this question.
Sure.
In light of the current funding situation and the charts that you put up there, Director, why wouldn't we, rather than these very expensive though very necessary reconstruction projects, why wouldn't we pour every penny we've got into maintenance?
As you can see, we are asking for about $68 million supplemental including our maintenance. The logic is this: as more projects fall into the poor category, you spend more money trying to maintain them, keep them in shape. So that's one aspect of it. But we have been doing these bandage projects for a long time. A lot of them are coming due now where we just can't bandage them anymore. 496, case in point, as I mentioned. There are several projects. I'll give you a good example. I-96 between Weberville and Howell. We just did another 1.5 mill and put 2 inch on top of that. But what's underneath is really bad. You can only do that for so long. 5 years, we're probably gonna be out there doing it again. But maybe 2 or 3 cycles, then you're gonna have to address what's underneath, or else you're just throwing good money away.
So it's a matter of safety as well as keeping up with that degradation curve, trying to stay ahead of the degradation curve on some of these stretches.
Exactly, and that's why that slide I showed with where we will be 65% in 2 years is going to really come into play, because we're going to have a lot of these kind of pavements out there that are really in need of reconstruct. But if we don't have the money to do that, it's just going to keep declining.
I guess I'm not convinced that our legislators understand that when they see major projects like this, and yet they're driving on other roads around their districts and around the state that are in failing condition. I guess I'm encouraging us to continue the work of education of our legislators to understand what that degradation curve means and why we have to make these kinds of major investments now, even as some of our roads are slipping from fair to poor condition.
Yeah, well, as you know, myself, the governor, and several of our senior staff in the room here, we did countless of town hall meetings this summer. Frankly, since March, when the governor released our budget, we were out there trying to educate the public on the need for this. I hate to say this, but I feel like we unconsciously got on a hamster wheel here, where in the spring, during freezing thaw cycle, people start complaining about how bad the potholes are. The legislatures give us a little money, we'll go out there, do some minor bandage work, everybody quiets down. Till the next time around, you start hearing it again. So educating the public is for us a continuous thing. Every time I meet with legislatures, I always make an offer to them that if they would like to have a public or town hall meetings in their district, and they want any one of us in MDOT to be there to share this kind of information, we'll be happy to do that. Some of them's taking us up on it, and we've been out there trying to get the word out.
Just one final question, if I might, Mr. Chair, or that question, my comment. I mean, use this body in that regard too. I'm in my 4th year on this in this service, and I've never been asked to be part of that educational process with our legislators or local city and township officials. So maybe others are part of that, but I encourage you to make use of us.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the offer.
Anything else? Director, thank you, and I know that you may have to leave early to go down the street to Detroit Public TV, and good luck with that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
On to commission business. The minutes of July 18th, 2019. Any changes? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
We have a motion and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I was not there, so let the record reflect that I will abstain. The proposed 2020 public meeting schedule. I've already been advised that the January 23rd meeting conflicts with the MITA conference, so we will move that date and advise you of that date at a different time, so don't put that into your calendars. Any other conflicts that you should be aware of?
Please move it a little later if you could. Earlier in the month, I'll be out of the country.
Later in the month?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have any conflicts they see right now? All right, we'll lock in those, we'll take a motion to lock in 3, and
I'll move.
and have
Second.
MDOT schedule the other one approved by this body now. You have a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? Okay, motion carries. The Transportation Asset Management Council appointments. Troy?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the Transportation Asset Management Commission is requesting your action on 5 appointments to the Transportation Asset Management Council. Those appointments are Christopher Bolt from the Michigan Association of Counties, Derek Bradshaw from the Michigan Association of Regions, Joanna Johnson from the County Road Association, Bob Slattery from the Michigan Municipal League, and Todd White from the Michigan Department of Transportation. And there is a motion needed, Mr. Chairman, for adoption of these recommended appointees to the TAMP.
Anyone have any questions?
Move
I have
the
a
adoption.
question.
Yes.
I have a question. How many people total are on this board? Is it more than this?
Yes.
Yes, there's
Quite a large board.
11.
11?
Yes, 11 total.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Move in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Tony, the noise abatement policy, proposed revision. This should be interesting.
I'll try to say it very quietly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. In your packet, you have a proposed revision to the Commission policy on noise abatement. Noise abatement or noise walls, or trying to deal with the effects of highway noise, is kind of an issue that always tends to come up, particularly in urbanized areas where there's more traffic as well as more residents near highways. There are really, federal law describes 2 types of noise walls. A type 1 is basically when we are building a project that increases the capacity of the roadway or moves the roadway closer to existing residents, that we go through the National Environmental Policy Act and we assess whether noise needs to be mitigated because of the impacts of the project. And if it does and can be at a reasonable cost, then noise walls or other noise abatement is included as part of the project costs. An example of that is I-75 right now in Oakland County, where we are expanding the freeway, or it's getting a little bit closer to the residents, that there are areas where we are putting up walls where they qualify. There is a second type defined in the federal law, type 2, which is a voluntary program where states can choose to invest where there might be existing, or there were pre-existing residents that or came in after the freeway was built or roadway was built, and states can choose to decide to work with those local communities to install noise abatement there. Our current policy, or your current policy, which was created in 2002, so 17 years ago, put a limitation on when we would consider a program for type 2, the voluntary program, to when we had a capital program of $1 billion or more, and then adjust it for inflation from moving forward. The proposed revision here, considering the fact that we are so short on our ability to meet pavement condition goals and bridge condition goals, is to add some language in section 2, the second paragraph, you'll see in there in bold language, that we not only have that $1 billion threshold that's adjusted for inflation, but that we also have met the Commission's goals for pavement and bridge condition for the previous 3 years running. So basically, the premise is it's not just a dollar threshold, but that our system is in a state of good repair before we invest in voluntary noise walls or noise abatement. So that's what's before you today. It does nothing to change our requirements when we are dealing with type 1 and are following the National Environmental Policy Act. So I will entertain any questions you have.
How
So
impa-
basi-
Okay.
Sorry. So basically, because we are having financial difficulty, it means until we've met our goals of 90%, We will not be funding any of these walls, is basically what this means.
We will not fund any voluntary walls. We will do them if they're required because of the NEPA evaluation, but not voluntary.
Not any other reason.
Correct.
So we're gonna try to reduce our costs and
Yes.
not waste money, is what you're telling me.
Well, I
Yes.
wouldn't say waste money, but prioritize it on the roads as opposed to a voluntary.
Well, noise reduction.
How impactful over the next few years do you think this will be? How many walls do you think we won't build?
Well, honestly, the Type 2 program has not been in effect for the last decade or more. There's really only one location, I think, that we've built, 127 in Lansing. We had a brief period of time where the program was opened up. So I'm not sure it's impacting the program. What we wanted to have is a situation, because of the 2015 package, that we're getting close to that $1 billion threshold, adjusted for inflation. But we're still falling way short of our goals, right? And so the impact would be that we're putting as much money toward our pavement and bridge condition as possible.
So one question, and I understand the rationale, I think, but does it also put MDOT in a position where if they really want to do this, you're precluded because we now put this into a policy?
Yes, that's true.
Well, you could always come back to us for a
but-
waiver.
I suppose we could. It's pretty unusual that we're the ones proposing to do that. Typically, these are situations where there's a complaint locally. Under the Type 2 program, there's an expectation of local funding contribution to this. And so it's usually generated from a local standpoint, a local municipality or something like that. So it's pretty rare that MDOT would propose to do a voluntary wall.
So, okay, so and on a policy, you could come back to the commission and we could grant a waiver, is that? I just heard the chairman say that.
We can waive our own
suppose so,
policy.
yes.
We can, okay. So let me ask a second question, and I highlighted this when I did my pre-reading because I always worry about us getting into a box that we later don't want to be in. Kind of what's prompting you to bring this before us today?
What's prompting it is the 2015 package is growing our capital improvement program to the point where we're getting close to that threshold.
Okay, yeah. you
And
said
it would
that.
open up the program now when we don't feel like we can really afford it. It would be different if we were meeting our condition goals, and so now it would be probably acceptable to consider voluntary types of things, but we don't feel like we're in a position financially or condition-wise to be considering voluntary programs.
The bottom line is when we get additional revenue, hopefully, that this program will then be opened up.
We don't want to spend it building roads, building walls.
Right.
At a point where we achieve the condition
Yes.
goals,
Yeah.
then it would be a reasonable consideration.
Any other question? Up, Chris.
Tony, what percentage split does the local municipality give?
Yeah, I apologize, I don't know offhand. I think it's 10%? 10%, thank you.
No, I agree. Prudent.
I'll take a motion.
I'll say the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Tony,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, Jack.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So I've edified you in past meetings about some of the stuff that my office does in terms of non-audit services and other things like that. A relatively rare item that we do is an investigation, and I think you're probably all aware that I was asked to do it, or my office was asked to do an investigation regarding to an acquisition, MDOT's acquisition of an aggregates market study. And what I'd like to do today is to read to you kind of an executive digest of that I developed, and then open it up to any kind of questions you might have in that regard. So, the objective of the investigation was to determine whether MDOT adhered to applicable requirements in its procurement of the study. And that'd be phases 1, phase 2. Our office's eventual conclusion was that MDOT did not adhere to applicable requirements in the procurement of the study. And as a result, MDOT contracted for and accepted consultant services in a resultant report that risks being insufficiently comprehensive, unverifiable, partially irrelevant, and consequently unreliable. Also, MDOT did not ensure that it received fair value for the costs it incurred. The details that I'll share today is that there are 8 pre-award steps which begin with MDOT efforts to determine its needs and end with the award of the contract to the entity that will meet its needs. MDOT has specific requirements that need to be followed according to the specifics of existing facts and circumstances. After the award, we identified 2 additional steps: monitoring the vendor and determining whether to accept the vendor's deliverable. In coming to our conclusion and in the development of our as a result statement above, we considered the 14 findings that we identified and reported. And to encapsulate the 14 findings, we noted topics related to non-existent or unavailable documentation, non-compliance with MDOT guidelines, ineffective or non-existent internal controls, possible ethical violations, and flawed judgment. So does the commission have any questions that I or my staff can try to answer?
Jack, thank you for probably one of the most important audits that STC has ever requested. We've also issued a statement under my name, and I believe that the Office of Auditor General is still completing their audit. And I would suggest, unless we have a major question, that we wait for the Office of Auditor General to release theirs before we decide on the next step. But I will see if there's any questions from my fellow commissioners. Hearing none, anything else on your report?
No, that'll do it for this quarter, so thank you so much for your time.
All right, on to oversight. Exhibit A, Patrick.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Exhibit A contains 10 contracts comprised of local agency participation contracts, passenger transportation contracts, and rail contracts. Do you have any questions on those?
Move approval of Exhibit A, Mr. Chair.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Exhibit A1.
Exhibit A1 contains 30 contracts, some of which will be let on October 18th, 2019, and some will be let on November 1st, 2019. All have an engineer's estimate greater than $500,000 and require commission approval. Do you have any questions?
Good question.
I do, thank you. Last time I asked this question, I was pleased with the answer I got, so I'll ask it again. Hopefully get the same answer.
Same thing.
There are 4 of these contracts, 3 state contracts, 1 local contract that involve bridge reconstruction or bridge work over our state's rivers. What are the not the construction mitigation matters, because I know we do a really good job on that, but what are the long-term stormwater management engineering design matters that are being used on these rivers? In other words, how are we assuring, as we rebuild these bridges, that that stormwater with all the salt and the petroleum and anything else that spills on the bridge deck doesn't wash straight into the river?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you.
You're here with the excellent answer. I said.
I'm looking for an excellent answer.
Thank you. Matt Chanel, Chief Bridge Engineer for MDOT. So there's 2 things that we do. Number 1, we look at the waterway itself and the adequacy of the cross section. So when we replace bridges, we actually look to lengthen them and we look to minimize their impact to the waterway. In terms of drains on a bridge, you'll notice on a lot of older bridges, there are downspouts on them and the water just drains directly into the river. That is no longer our practice, and we're actually taking a little further with water quality in terms of running it all off the end of the bridge and then through a swale and then into the waterway. So when we reconstruct bridges, that's our typical practice.
So in these four instances, one over the Manasquan River, one over the Rifle River, the Black River, and Buckhorn Creek, that's probably what we're doing.
That's correct. Yep.
Excellent, excellent, very good.
So for those who don't know, the swell is then acting as a way to naturally filter out the impurities that would then not arrive into the waterway.
Very good, thank you. I won't ask that question again, Mr. Chair.
I like it.
You know, I've been asking it for 4 years, and we're doing good work. I mean, our state's rivers, the waters, the lakes are so precious to us that anything we can do to minimize the impact of stormwater runoff into those rivers is a good thing to do, and we're doing it.
What MDOT's called,
Kudos.
it's called the Hartwell Policy. It was implemented about 3 years ago. I think we're at the motion.
Move.
Second.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Patrick.
If you'll entertain me while I'm here, I
Yes,
could handle
absolutely,
some of the
for-
other reporting.
Yes.
Exhibit A3 had nothing to report, so that's just informational for your knowledge. Further down in Section 4, the informational reports, the September 26th Director's Agenda had no items on it. That's informational. And the September 26, 2019 State Ad Board Agenda contains 52 contracts, the majority of which are bid letting items. Do you have any questions about that section?
Give the commissioners a moment to catch up and flip in their,
What is he on, exhibit B, or what is he referring to?
down in
Oh, gotcha.
Section
Okay.
4,
I was
State
all
Ad Board.
confused. Okay.
Helen, any questions?
No.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Good job as always.
Thanks.
Exhibit A2, Brad, letting exceptions.
Mr. Chairman, don't put this in the minutes, but I was told somebody left their trunk open in the parking lot, a Chevy Cruze. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Thanks, Bill.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have just one project here for your consideration and approval. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Any questions?
Move approval.
You have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Thank
very
you.
much.
Greg. Construction contracts.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm new here. First, I'd just like to introduce myself really quick. I'm Greg Brunner. I'm the Director of our Bureau of Field Services. I've been in this position for about 7 months. So I'm here today to talk about our construction contracts for the last quarter. And overall, we've had 73 projects that were finalized for about $200 million. 7 of those projects came in over the 10% amount, and 45 of those projects came in under the contracted amount. So for those MDOT contracts, in the last 3 months respectively, they were negative 0.38% under budget, 2.21% over budget, and 0.67% under budget compared to the original contract amount. So overall, for our year-to-date, we're about 0.03% over the contract amount. So we're very, very close. Year-to-date, local agency projects, there were 91 projects totaled for approximately $94 million that were finalized in the last quarter. 5 of those projects were 10% over the contract amount, and 54 of those projects came in under the 10% amount. Or I'm sorry, under the contracted amount. So we've had 7 MDOT projects and 5 local agency projects that are being presented today. And are there any questions that I can answer?
Greg, when those projects come in under budget, is it that the less units are used, the scope is decreased?
Correct.
Okay. Is it because of design changes, or is it to meet the budget that the scope is decreased?
It varies depending on the project, what's going on there. Sometimes less quantities are required, sometimes there are slight changes of the scope. And it's more or less a judgment made in the field on each project.
There's some of them budget factors to achieve budget? Is that some of the factors that are utilized?
Not for contract projects coming under contract, no. The budget's set once the contract is awarded, so depending on field conditions that are encountered out there, they may come in under budget.
Greg, you seeing any trends?
Overall, like I said, most of the contracts are coming in very close to budget when you start looking at them globally, so we aren't seeing any major trends out there.
Any pricing pressures?
Not too many that we've seen. Overall, from a material standpoint, prices seem to be going up, just along with the economy for, all of our materials out there, but we're looking through our engineers' estimates as they're going out, and they're pretty close to the contracts being awarded, so we're working to accommodate those.
Any further questions? Thank you. No motion required.
Thank you.
Jack, 6-month financial audit follow-up.
So Exhibit C, as Todd just said, is the 6-month financial review follow-up report on unresolved service contract reviews where more than 120 days have passed since we issued the report. And as the report indicates, there are no unresolved service contract reviews that were more than 120 days have passed since we reviewed the report. And I'm asking the commission to accept the report.
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? Thank you, Jack. We should call that the Midland Baseball Report. We did that, should we call it, that game you took us to?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right, the
Good
five-year,
memory.
five-year plan presentation. This is final approval of MDOT's 5-year plan.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Lina Chapman. I'm here to present to you the final draft of the 5-year transportation program for fiscal year 20 through 24. Oops. So, you've seen this slide already. The director presented this briefly, but just to reiterate, our 5-year total program investment is $12.3 billion, with 9.3 of that going into the highway program, 2.3 into public transportation, and 701.3 million into the aviation program. So this is a screenshot of the table that's in the middle of the document that provides a little bit more detail behind what those numbers were in the previous pie chart. So you'll see that 7.9 billion is dedicated to the repairing and rebuilding Michigan roads and bridges program over the 5-year time period. 989 million will be invested in programs that fall under the safety and system operations category. And then 419 million will be invested in programs such as the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program, roadside facilities, workforce development, other state-funded programs, and then the build, US 31 build grant is included there as well. For the highway program pie chart, this has already been gone over briefly as well. So I won't go into this too much, but again, $1.7 billion. This is just for fiscal year 20, and the breakdown is as shown on the screen there. For the multimodal program, nothing has changed since this was presented to you in July. So fiscal year 20, they're planning 140.3 million and 457.1 million for the public transportation program. And then if we were to break those numbers out for fiscal year 20 for bus and marine programs, we're looking at $346.5 million. That's invested into preserving local bus service in all 83 counties and providing operating assistance to the marine passenger systems and intercity bus services that are considered essential to national connectivity. And then for the rail and port programs, there's $110.5 million dedicated, and most of that is to preserve and enhance Michigan's intercity passenger rail service. And then here's the 140.3 for the aviation program. They've got 106 million to the primary airports, 34 million goes to roughly 90 general service airports, and then there's about 250,000 that goes into the air service program that's designed to support and attract air service. And then in August, we did public comment. We have a 31-day public comment period. During that time period, the website received just under 4,000 visits. The document itself was downloaded over 1,000 times, and we received 24 comments from 24 different individuals. Each one of those comments we personally address and make sure that their concerns are addressed as well as we can, so we forward those out to MDOT project area experts, regions, or local staff that maybe don't answer public comments as they come in. And then, so today I'm here to request your approval to post the final 5-year transportation program to MDOT's website. Upon your approval, we'll get that on the web along with a live interactive map that shows all the projects that you'll see in the document in the project list section. So you'll be able to click on projects in the map and see details about them, including lengths and details like that. And then upon your approval, we submit this document to the state legislature prior to March 1 deadline. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll entertain them now.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, page 9 of the report highlights the Gordie Howe International Bridge construction. That wasn't in the slides. He's going to be mad at me, but I wonder if I could ask Tony to just give us a 60-second kind of update. Tony's running point for MDOT on the project, and as the commissioners know, I sit as one of the International Authority members. So, Tony, I'm sorry to do that to you, but could you just real quickly give us just a quick update?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So the Gordie Howe International Bridge Project has been a partnership between the governments of Canada, the United States, Michigan, and Ontario for a number of years. And a little over a year ago, the construction contract was awarded by the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. Over the course of this last year, most of the activity has been in the pre-phase of design and getting the initial designs and things together in a design, build, finance, operate, maintain type of structure. Progress has been made. They have begun some of the foundational work on both sides of the border. The beginning of the pylons that go into the ground and support the major piers of the bridge has started. There's work on the seawall on the United States side that is ongoing right now. We continue, this has been a phased work, but we continue the work of finalizing the property acquisition and cleanup of environmental contamination, but that is progressing relatively well. So overall, the project remains on schedule. There's a few things where the contractor is maybe behind their original plan, but it hasn't affected the overall schedule of the project. They remain still on schedule according to their critical path. So generally speaking, I would say it's progressing well, and probably in the next year, people will actually start seeing things above ground types of activities and actually start seeing a structure taking shape.
Thanks, Tony. I didn't mean to take that kind of out of context here, but it is in context. It's probably the biggest project in the book, and will have a critical impact on certainly the 5-year transportation plan in southeast Michigan and well, entire southern Michigan.
It is certainly a unique project in the sense that we're very affected by it, but it is not our contract, right? So we have a role working with the International Authority, working with the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, working with Federal Highway Administration to make sure Michigan's interests and U.S. interests are protected and that it's built safely and meets our.
And that's a critical point, because Canada is financing, they're not paying for. The future toll payers will pay for the bridge, but they are financing it, and so it's critical that we stay engaged as Michigan on behalf of the taxpayers of Michigan and the United States, actually, and make sure that our interests are well pursued. And Tony, we thank you for your help and support on that, so thank you.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge particularly Brad Weifrick in the audience. He's really running point on a lot of the technical details. Matt Chenoweth on the bridge stuff. I'll tell you what, we've got one of the best bridge engineers in the country here in Michigan.
Matt is the best bridge engineer in the country.
And he basically wrote the specifications for the new international crossing, the actual bridge itself. So we're very fortunate to have folks on our team that are looking out for us, and many others too that I didn't mention.
Well, I think to that point, if I could just take one more liberty, and that is through this whole process, I've been representing the interests of the people of Michigan for the last 4 or 5 years on the authority, and the MDOT engagement, expertise, capability, and even other state departments, including the Attorney General's office and David, has just been tremendous, and always with the highest degree of capability and professionalism. So I can't say enough about that. I'm very proud of the state of Michigan, Michigan government.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, this is one of the most important things we do, so I will take a motion on this as well.
I move.
Approval of the 5-year plan.
Second?
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? You know, your question to Tony made me think that maybe we should add, since we only meet quarterly, information report, just not to be done every time, but we should put it there, and sometimes we just say no further changes on that bridge. It is the biggest thing that is going on in the state, and if we could add that to information reports, it doesn't have to be every time, but we can just have something there so that it will kick us as to, we should have something once in a while on it.
I don't know that it would make sense, Mr. Chairman, for us to at least consider in 2020 that we have a meeting in Detroit, and in conjunction with that, perhaps have a field trip to see progress. And I'd suggest that maybe in our fall 2020 meeting.
You don't want it in the January meeting?
No.
All right, so the fall 2020 meeting will be in Detroit, and it will be a field trip. Bring your enhanced driver's licenses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Zach for the Transportation Asset Management Plan.
Good morning. My name is Zach Grable, and I am a transportation planner in the Asset Management and Policy Division at MDOT. I'm here to briefly present on MDOT's recently developed and implemented TAMP, which has been federally approved. I'm also here to ask the Commission to approve MDOT's TAMP in order to comply with the state's Public Act 325 requirements. Public Act 325 of 2018 mandates that agencies responsible for 100-plus certified miles of road must develop and implement transportation asset management plans. MDOT qualifies as one of these agencies, but because FHWA provides guidance to MDOT for its TAMP, TAMC does not also administer guidance to MDOT for its Public Act 325 Transportation Asset Management Plan. However, in order to comply with Public Act 325, MDOT needs the STC to approve its federally approved TAMP. MAP 21 required state DOTs to develop and implement a TAMP that addresses the pavements and bridges on the national highway system, including both trunk line and local assets. There was extensive discussion about how to approach MDOT's TAMP and if it made sense to include non-required assets. However, a decision was made to include only those that were required in lieu of risking federal penalty for not being able to measure the performance of other assets. This might be difficult to read, but what this flowchart shows is that the TAMP has become a part of the department's strategic planning process. It sits between the state's long-range transportation plan and the STIP and 5-year program. From a planning horizon perspective, the TAMP is shorter at 10 years and more detailed than the long-range plan, but longer and less detailed than the STIP or 5-year program, which it now informs. MDOT's TAMP was submitted with consistency documentation in June of this year to FHWA, and on August 28th, MDOT received determination that its TAMP was consistent and compliant with all federal requirements from the FHWA Division Office. So briefly, here's an outline of MDOT's TAMP chapters. I would like to highlight the inclusion of risk management and resiliency throughout the document. Again, the TAMP focuses solely on the NHS, specifically just the required assets of the system. MDOT's NHS roadways constitute 54% of the trunk line route miles and 66% of the trunk line lane miles. MDOT's NHS bridges constitute 61% of the trunk line bridges and 67% of the trunk line bridge deck area. Moving forward, MDOT will be looking into adding additional assets to its future TAMPs. One of the key components of the TAMP is its description and evaluation of the 4 federally mandated investment strategies. The first of these is what it takes to achieve the national goals of no more than 5% poor interstate pavements and no more than 10% poor NHS bridges. To do this, MDOT needs roughly $1.8 billion over 10 years for pavements and bridges, but This number assumes redirecting all pavement funding to the interstate, which would eliminate funds for capital investment on the non-interstate NHS routes. This is something MDOT would never do. The second of these is what it takes to preserve the current condition of NHS pavement and bridge assets. To do this, MDOT would need roughly $8.4 billion over 10 years. The third is what it takes to achieve and sustain a desired state of good repair goal for NHS pavements and bridges based on MDOT's aspirational goals for these systems. To do this, MDOT needs roughly $10.7 billion over 10 years. And finally, the constrained investment, which is the strategic investment of the funds reasonably expected to be available for NHS pavement and bridges. This is what MDOT lives and works with every day and represents the department's current investment strategy. As just mentioned, MDOT uses the constrained investment strategy as the department continually aspires to do more. This investment strategy is baked into the 5-year program that's annually adopted by the Commission and is the best achievable strategy consistent with the overall goals and objectives established by the Commission. In 1997, the SCC adopted the long-term goal of 95% of freeways and 85% of MDOT non-freeways in good or fair condition based on the RSL performance measure. For the TAMP, MDOT was required to develop a state of good repair goal for its NHS pavement and bridges and did so to be consistent with both the national goals and the STC goals adopted in 1997. For pavements and bridges, the interstate and non-interstate NHS state of good repair goals are 95% and 85% in good or fair condition, respectively. These aspirational goals drive the financial needs for Michigan's system. To meet its state of good repair goals, MDOT needs to address pavement condition gaps for its interstate and non-interstate NHS networks. The two graphs here depict the gap in condition between the long-term state of good repair pavement goals and the projected future pavement condition based on our constrained investment strategy. MDOT needs roughly $1 billion annually through 2030 only for the NHS, which is a subset of the larger Michigan road network. MDOT has been able to more successfully meet its aspirational goals for bridge condition. Even so, the graph here depicts that $32 million is needed annually to close the NHS bridge condition gap. So what's next for the TAMP? The document needs approval by the Commission for compliance with Public Act 325. Annual consistency determinations are required, and documentation showing consistency must be submitted by MDOT to FHWA on June 30th of each year. And the department will continue to integrate resiliency principles into its long-term planning and asset management efforts. With that, I'll take any questions you guys might have.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. It's another really good report this year. Would you just remind us what the office is doing with regard to education, training of our local partners, and if you've got the number in your head, what percentage of our local partners are using the asset management planning tool?
That's a great question for our TAMC guy, Roger.
Good morning. My name is Roger Belknap. I'm the coordinator for the Transportation Asset Management Council. To your question, Commissioner Hartwell, just this past October 1st, the TAMC published our template and announced a series of workshops and trainings really geared towards assisting the local agencies work through the PA 325 requirement. As Zach mentioned, agencies that certify 100 miles of road or more are required over the course of the next 3 years to be submitting their own asset management plan. So throughout this year and the next 3 years, the TAMC work program will be holding trainings and seminars to help agencies through this process. He also mentioned 123 agencies have that requirement, all 83 county road agencies, and then 39 of Michigan's largest cities and villages. Throughout the past several years, I would say anywhere from 15 to 25% of those agencies have been submitting TAMP their own TAMP to the Asset Management Council. Many of those TAMPs were developed from the previous TAMP-C template that was created in 2011 when Public Act 325 was passed last year. They gave us a nice template as far as what's going to be required, and our template needed to add 2 new elements. So that's going to be the difference between the TAMPs that had been submitted prior to last year and what we're going to be looking at for compliance going forward.
Very good, thank you. That's great.
Any other questions?
I just have a question about this. When we submit this to the federal government and they see that we need all this money, do they ask us how we're gonna come up with it, or they just accept it as it is? And, I mean, do other states have these same issues that we do, or we?
Other states certainly have many funding issues. I can't speak exactly to the gravity of them. Craig, do you have anything?
Craig Newell, Administrator of the Asset Management Policy Division. Could you restate that one more time, please?
Well, when we submit this to the government or federal government, do they ask us, how do you expect to fund this? I mean, we know what we need to come up with. We know we don't have it. What do they?
So we are required to determine the gaps that we need to fund the different investment strategies that Zach reported on. And then we are required to identify, to meet some different performance measure targets that were established along with the locals. We worked with different agencies and had representatives on our teams from some of the MPOs to identify those targets. So we are required, the requirement is basically to report your progress and to make progress towards those targets that we established.
So do you have to give them quarterly updates, or is this just an annual report?
There is an annual requirement of a consistency determination that we are selecting projects based on our investment strategy to make progress towards those goals and targets.
But the follow-up question to Helen's is, are there sanctions written into the act for states that fail to close their gap?
Yes, so if you fail to close your gap or not make progress towards those targets, you are required to report on how you will be doing a better job in the future. And then if you do not meet the national goal requirement, there are some penalties to how you are supposed to be spending your federal funds. More towards if you are not meeting the national goal, which is an interstate target, you are required to spend more federal money on the interstate system.
Are we in danger of hitting that?
No, we are not. We actually spend more money at this point on the interstate system than we would be required to under penalty anyway.
How do we benchmark to other states? Do we have that data?
FHWA, I believe, is creating a national portal that will benchmark every state's current condition and their targets.
Any final questions? Thank you. I'll take a motion.
So move.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? All right, public comments. Anybody here from the public wish to make a comment? What?
What's the agenda we got in the mail?
What did you think? No, I took that off. I took that off. No public comment? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.